In this video, we're going to talk about some of the legal and compliance concerns faced by investment advisor firms and their ESG products or services that they're offering. Hello again, my name is Michael Rasmussen. I am the founder of United Atlantic Legal Services, a boutique law firm focused exclusively on investment advisors in the United States and United Kingdom. Today, like I said, we're going to talk about ESG and all of the compliance and legal concerns that come along with investment advisors offering these types of products and services. This is my YouTube series last week, this week in RIA Compliance, where we discuss a number of legal and compliance topics related to investment advisor firms. If you like these topics, please do hit subscribe. So like I said, we're going to be talking about the legal and compliance issues faced by investment advisors offering ESG products and services. To begin with, it's really important to understand that there's a lot of different definitions of what ESG is. Obviously, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. It's the idea that companies can proactively make a positive impact on those areas through their corporate governance, right? And the actions that they take. However, what's important to understand is that the SEC, as far as I know, doesn't have a set definition of what ESG stands for or what that actually means in practice. What I have seen is that the SEC has come back on investment advisor firms who are offering these types of products and asked them to define what ESG means. And they'll be looking at things like your marketing. How are you explaining ESG to your clients? How are you managing those portfolios, of course? How are you initially setting up the parameters for those portfolios, and so on and so forth. So when you're thinking about offering ESG products or services, spend a lot of time upfront discussing what exactly it means. If there's a specific area of ESG that you're going to focus on, environmental, for example, what does that actually mean? How are you going to explain it to your clients? How are you going to describe it to prospects in marketing materials, and so on and so forth? It's very important that your firm understands internally what the product actually is going to be before they start selling it to their clients. Once you've identified what ESG is, obviously you need to appoint somebody who's responsible for ensuring that the product or service that is being offered stays within that definition or within the parameters that you've set. So typically we see an investment committee at an investment advisor firm, for example, set those boundaries and those parameters for what ESG is in their world, what that service or that product specifically looks like. For example, a portfolio manager will be responsible for executing that vision and making sure that those investments stay within the defined parameters set by the investment committee, which means that there should be some oversight on an ongoing basis by the investment committee, for example, checking in on a quarterly basis to make sure that those parameters that were initially set still make sense, and that portfolio manager has been keeping the portfolio within those defined parameters. Another thing that's kind of overlooked by our compliance professionals is that when you offer an ESG product, it's not just about the initial parameters and what it goes into the portfolio, for example, to start with. It's an ongoing process of reviewing it. So for example, if you've set up an environmentally conscious portfolio and there's 20 names in that portfolio, a portfolio of 20 different securities that was originally reviewed and assessed to make sure it met the firm's ESG requirements, somebody needs to be checking that on an ongoing basis, not only to make sure that the portfolio still meets that criteria, the companies that were initially put into the portfolio still meet whatever that definition is. Obviously, companies can change. They can change leadership over time, and they can head in different directions, which would have them fall outside of those parameters. It's very important that you stay aware of what is going on both internally inside that portfolio or product, and then externally what's going on at those companies. So from a client's perspective, you look at what you're talking to them about, what they want. Oftentimes, ESG portfolios created for an institutional or high net worth client who wants to focus on a specific area, and you develop around their thesis and their goals as well. So constant communication and making sure that you're meeting the expectations of that client is absolutely critical as well. All right, so we talked about what the client expects. They expect you to communicate with them. They expect to be able to have some input on those products and services that you're labeling as ESG. And then they obviously expect ongoing communication to make sure that what they were told was going to be in that portfolio or product, it remains in that portfolio or product. So that's really what the client's focused on. But from a regulator's perspective, it's a little bit different. And I want to share with you a recent SEC examination request letter that one of my clients received regarding their ESG investment. I'm just going to give you a small sample of what was requested during that examination, and you can see how detailed and how specific they get. So the first one was state the registrant's internal definition of any terms that relate to ESG. That goes back to that first point I made about making sure that your firm really understands what ESG means to them in that particular portfolio. The second one was list and describe for each ESG factor utilized. So, what were the parameters again that the investment advisor firm relied on to make those decisions of whether or not an investment fell within or outside of a proposed ESG thesis, product, service? The third thing that they requested here was the policies and procedures specific to the ESG. So, ongoing testing and how the firm made sure that the investments inside that service and product again stayed relevant to the initial thesis and was being monitored and that sort of thing. So my compliance professionals out there really need to focus in on this one, make sure that they have their policies and procedures in place. The fourth one that they asked for was a table listing all of the ESG investments that were recommended. So quite obviously, they're going to actually look at that product or that portfolio and make sure that what was being told to clients is actually what is in that product or portfolio. Then, of course, they're going to talk about whether or not you used any third parties to test your ESG guidelines, for example, or to test your portfolio to make sure that they stayed within those parameters and that sort of thing. So there's really a couple takeaways that I want everybody to have from this conversation about ESG compliance and legal risks for investment advisors. And the first one is, again, that communication element. Are you talking internally about what the definition of ESG is, what that portfolio should look like? And then how are you communicating that to your clients and your prospects? What do those marketing materials look like? Do those things match up? And then the second thing I want you to take away is that there has to be documentation. Process. Ensure that you have everything written out when it comes to how this initial due diligence of your ESG portfolio or product are going to be created, and then what the process is for ongoing monitoring and testing. So ESG, like crypto, is an emerging area. There's going to be regulation more and more coming. You should note that the SEC really has focused in on disclosure when it comes to ESG. What are you telling people, and are you actually following through? So again, my name is Michael Rasmussen. Thank you for joining us. If you like this video, please do hit the subscribe button, and we really hope we see you in a later video.